most important or maybe most famous was Dr. Kenji Terahuchi from Japan Airlines over Alaska. When he was flying over there and saw a UFO that was twice as big, he said, as an aircraft carrier. Those kinds of things are going on all the time. From my experience with the pilot reporting agency that have got those reports coming in. Plus, you know, our old buddy Peter Davenport from the National UFO Reporting Center, who I've represented for the last 25 years, he says that these things are happening all over the United States as well as the world.
One of his missions is to facilitate disclosure on a grassroots level and to help dispel the stigma that has been historically attached to openly discussing UFO sightings and encounters. Michael W. Hall is in the studio, and we're going to talk about everything. That and more coming right up on My Alien Life. My Alien Life is recorded live from atop the Northern Rocky Mountains and is available on Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, and everywhere fine podcasts are found. My website is at www.myalienlifepodcast.com. There you will find my email address, all previously recorded shows, and more. I am Cameron Brower. This is My Alien Life, and the podcast starts right now.
My Alien Life Podcast.
Three, two, one, zero, and liftoff.
Tonight in the studio, I have a lifelong student of the sweet science of UFOs and other related phenomena. If you've never heard of Michael W. Hall, there isn't a better time to hear about him than right now. Michael W. Hall, thank you so much for joining me, and welcome.
Thank you for asking me to come on, because I tell you what, there is just stuff happening in the paranormal, UFO-wise, Bigfoot-wise, all sorts of things going on right now that we need to talk about.
And you and I kind of live right in the middle of it. You know, I'm in Montana. You're in. Are you in Washington tonight?
Yep, I'm over in the Seattle area.
Nice.
Just north, right on the Puget Sound. I live in a little community called Edmonds, Washington, which is right on the waterfront with a ferry boat that scoots across the sound to the Olympic Peninsula, where all the Bigfoots are. But I'm not too far from SeaTac Airport as well here in Seattle.
And that's like one of my favorite places in the world. I mean, every chance I get, that's where I go. I mean, I love to vacation there.
Well, I think you know, Cameron, that I came right through your neck of the woods for the holidays on the Amtrak, what I call Paranormal Express. It was just an amazing trip across the United States on the train for the holidays, checking out various paranormal hotspots. Right. And man, it was beautiful in Montana. So out there,
I was going to bring that up because I was watching your videos and listening to you talk about traveling on the Empire Builder through Montana, you know, across what we call the High Line. And I grew up on the High Line, and it's a very, very active place to engage and see UFOs. Do you know the area?
I do. And the reason that I do know the area is, for many years, of course, I've been interested in UFOs and been helping as an attorney for the last 35 years, many ufologists in the field of UFOs as well. But many of the conferences that I attend had a lot of these ex-military guys that were telling us about all of the nuclear missile silos that were shut down on the northern tier of the United States up there in your neck of the woods. You bet. During UFO sightings and stuff. So man, was I excited to jump on the observation car going through the snow, literally, of Montana, looking at all the nighttime skies, the daytime skies, just looking to see if I could find any strange anomalous events that were going on in that area because of all those sighting reports that you guys have up there.
I think people get really tired of me saying this, but if you want to see UFOs, just come to north central Montana and just look straight up. I mean, there's always something happening. Where I grew up, it became a way of life. People would, we talk maybe later about cattle mutilations, but things like that. It was just a thing that happened, and it was expected, and it was something that people just lived with, and it got to the point where, you heard about it a lot in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. And after that, it's just one of those things, and it's not unusual anymore for up there.
No, not at all. Matter of fact, Cameron, you can verify this story that I heard because I think you might have seen my podcast that I did all across the country on the train. But I was surprised in Montana by a friend of mine that I had known for a long time, 20 years, and I hadn't seen him for 17 years. Come to find out, he tapped me on the shoulder when I was in the dining room car going through Montana. He is a conductor and an engineer on the Burlington Northern, and basically found out that I was podcasting across the country during the holidays, and he kind of scheduled a deadhead that he had to do coming back from Christmas time on the train to intercept me. And my friend's name is Kevin, and he said that, believe it or not, there was a study made that they were trying to find out what would be the most isolated community in the contiguous United States area. And of course, they put in all of the different formulas and all the different things, how far away you are from gas stations, from food, from, modern conveniences. And he says, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, that Glasgow, Montana is the most isolated community in the United States.
Well, you can take Glasgow and then just go straight north or south or west of there, and it's even more isolated. I mean, Glasgow is, to me, at one time there used to be an Air Force base there. So they turned that into, I think it's some sort of retirement home or condos or something like that. So Glasgow has some things, you can buy groceries and you can do things there, but there's towns straight north and south of there that, towns with 5 people or 2 families or, that have been there for over 100 years. And, you're really out in the middle of nowhere there. I mean, it's beautiful, but it is.
I remember in the observation deck up there, middle of the day, just looking around when I was going through Montana, snow everywhere. All the fields were covered, all the cows were covered. They're all standing out there in the freezing cold. And I remember looking in a 360-degree view and not seeing anything.
Right.
Not a hill, not a mountain, not trees, not anything. As far as I could see in 360 degrees. I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. And here's the thing. My friend Kevin says that to tell you how isolated he is, even in Glasgow, he says that there is not even a Walmart within 100-mile radius of his front porch.
No, I'm sure there's not. And one of the things.
So you can imagine those other towns, how far away they are if they're even smaller than Glasgow. That's fascinating.
I remember as a kid, I was in high school and we were in sports and there was a town, Turner, Montana. If you go to Turner, Montana, you're basically on the High Line and north, almost right to the Canadian border. And I remember we, for some reason I went out, after the game or whatever was going on to the bus. And it was about maybe a city block long walk. And there's nothing there, hardly just the school and a few houses. And I just remember looking up and seeing more stars and everything. And I could hear my heartbeat. And it was just startling. I mean, just to walk out there and hear your heartbeat, you know, and nobody else out there. It was the quietest place for sure that I had ever been. Even growing up in a community like that, this one was even more so. The community I grew up in, there was probably 4 small towns of 200 people, you know, in 20 square miles. But there it was, you were out there, man, and it was, you could see it, you know, and you could feel it, you know, there's something very unusual out there, and you know, you never feel alone, but it's very, very quiet.
Well, you can imagine if there was an alien abduction program going on, that it'd be pretty easy to pinpoint someplace like that to pick up a few folks. You know, there's not a lot of people going to see what you're doing, and probably those folks won't even tell you about it, even if it did happen. So they've got some amazing stories out there.
In the town I grew up in, about 100 people, and you know, we didn't talk about things like that much. You know, the kids I hung out with, we did, but people didn't talk about it much, and I think just because there was knowledge of that, and we didn't know back then what we could and what we couldn't talk about, just because. You know what the stigma that's like, and it attaches itself, and it's hard to shake it. So I think that's why not a lot of people talked about it, but there was a lot of things to talk about, Michael.
I'll bet. Not only UFOs, but you've got you know, ghost activity. You've got even Bigfoot in Montana. Those kinds of cryptid sightings are out there as well. It's just amazing. Although, you know what's going on now, Cameron, as you can probably tell, more and more people are coming forward with their stories now. The stuff is in the mainstream media talking about the Navy coming out with new guidelines to report UFOs.
Right.
The Tic Tac Nimitz UFO encounter was all about last year, you know, bringing all that out. Everything is becoming, I think, quickened in the news, in the mainstream about
for sure. That's
all
a good
of this
word.
paranormal activity.
Yeah. And one of the things too that I would interest me was that I know a couple pilots here locally that I've asked if they've seen anything. And I had John Lear on the show, and I asked him, you know, he had been up in the air a lot, and all kinds of aircrafts. And he said, well, no. And but he said, well, there was this one time, and he told this story, and it wasn't real impressive, but it was a story nonetheless. But it makes me wonder why, you know, if they're just seeing it in certain parts of the country, or they're seeing it because it's a military exercise and they're able to see it because of that, if it attracts them some way. But, you know, it makes me wonder why certain things happen where they do, you know, why not everywhere, but definitely little place I grew up in, you know, back then. It was pretty incredible, and different experiences that I had. And, you know, I just really don't doubt if I went back there today, I would still see some of those same things. Yeah.
Oh, I'll bet. You know, one of my longtime clients, Cameron, is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Richard Haynes. And he ran the NARCAP agency, which was the pilot reporting agency for UFOs and anomalous aerial activity. They call them UAPs, of course, in the military. And Dr. Haynes has an AirCat catalog, he calls it, of thousands and thousands of military, commercial airline pilots' reports of UFOs. Probably the most important or maybe most famous was Dr. Kenji Terahuchi from Japan Airlines over Alaska, when he was flying over there and saw a UFO in his commercial airliner. He was the captain of the major airline that was twice as big, he said, as an aircraft carrier out his windscreen. And those kinds of things are going on all the time. From my experience with the pilot reporting agency that have got those reports coming in. Plus, you know, our old buddy Peter Davenport from the National UFO Reporting Center who I've represented for the last 25 years, he says that these things are happening all over the United States as well as the world. And, he gets all the reports from the FAA towers, from every airport across the country. All of the military installations and law enforcement also calls Peter Davenport with those sightings. So if anybody wants to get up to speed on what's going on right there in their own little hometown in Glasgow, Montana even, all you got to do is go to newfork.org on Peter Davenport's website, and you can punch up your own state and your own backyard and find out who's reported what. Fascinating.
Yeah, I'm actually going to Glasgow next month. My son has a hockey tournament there, and I look forward to that trip, as long as the weather's good. It's a long drive. Yeah. It's a 10-hour drive, and it's amazing, in Montana that you could drive for 14 hours and still be in the state of Montana. And so
and I just got a kick out of this when I talked with a few people on the train about, living out there and stuff. They say it's nothing for them to drive 70 miles for a pizza.
Right. And that was, we did it all the time. When I was a kid, it was everybody drove. It's like if you're 15 and you're out driving, your parents aren't going to drive you to school, every day. They're not going to drive you to pick you up after a basketball practice at 7:30 at night, because they have to drive 25 miles, so when I was growing up, of course I was involved in a lot of that stuff, but one of the things too, that I had gotten a job at a radio station, and everybody knows this, but I used to drive back and forth to this radio station, and it was like 25 miles one way. And, I'm out there on the prairie in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of night, and just running into all kinds of things, seeing things that, out in the distance on the prairie that I'd never seen before, or up in the sky, and it's just amazing. Wow. It was all good. I think for the most part it was good. Anytime I was out and about, it was a lot of fun, and it was, you really learned and grew up and learned how to take care of yourself. And they kind of let us loose with a vehicle and let us run wild when I was a kid.
Yeah. It's like, those days, you were probably even driving before you were of legal age, because you had to. I mean, out on the farm, out there doing chores, you got to get around, you got to go get parts, whatever. By the way, you've got some stories yourself. Did you ever experience anything like missing time as you were out there? Seriously?
Yeah, and I've probably done 6 podcasts on that, and it's
wonderful.
Excuse me. And one of the ones that I remember real vividly, I went to my first kegger, and my best friend was a year older than me, and we went out on the prairie, and we went into this area. I call it the Montana Triangle, sometimes kind of like Bermuda Triangle. It's just in that area, so much weird stuff happened. And you're talking about maybe to the small end of it, 5 miles by 5 miles, but to the longer end of it, this triangle shape, maybe 20 miles. But we were out, and we'd gotten to this party, and it's a long story, but it was most all the kids were older. We were young. I was not even a freshman. He was a freshman, and I kind of was standing there by myself, and this older guy that I knew came up, and he was a senior, and asked me if I wanted something to drink. And I said, he goes, I got a grape pop in my truck. So he gave me this grape pop, and there's this big fire roaring, and I was what's that?
You said grape. Did you say grape pop or a great pop?
Grape soda. And
grape soda. I remember those. Yeah, those are great.
So, and it was a Shasta, it was just generic, and it was warm, and it was like warm like the vehicle. And it was starting to kind of cool off at night, and it was like 10-ish at night. And I'm sitting on this, there's one big rock out there, and I'm leaning against it, and all these vehicles are kind of parked in a line, and everybody's over by the vehicles. I'm by myself by this rock, and I'm just watching this fire, and all of a sudden everything just changed. It's just like everything became quiet. And, I kind of looked across this fire, which was almost gone now, and I could see something sitting maybe 30 feet on a gopher mound there in front of me. And it's a can of grape soda like I had. And I looked at my hand and I didn't have one in my hand. And so, I'm looking at these cars and there's less cars there than there were before. And people are kind of walking around like they're ready to leave. And, I walked over and I looked at that can sitting on the ground. I picked it up. It weighed the same as mine did. It was the same temperature and it had to been the same one. Right. So, I kind of looked around and found my friend. And next thing I knew, I never wore a watch very often, but I had one and it was like 3 hours later. And,
oh, wow.
And it was just terror. I said, we got to get out of here. I said, we're late. I remember screaming, we're late. We got to go. And I was really worried at that point, we were late and we were going to be very late and we drove home. We never said a word about it to each other. I don't know if he was aware of it. But I lost about 3 hours very quick and, don't know, it just disappeared. And, it was marked pretty clearly. I could, I was looking at one thing and then a moment later I was looking at the world, totally different. And I remember, people turning on their vehicles and starting to leave and, like party over, but, I lost 3-4 hours, something like that. It happened more than once. But that's one.
I have that same kind of experience that you have of some missing time. And the one thing that I can mention and say to anybody who haven't experienced it, or even those who do, that is just so startling how seamless that break is. And, that you just mentioned the fact that you were staring at a fire and just a split second later, you noticed there was something different about it. But the fact that it's so relatively seamless is just frightening.
Right.
That something can happen in a split moment that is almost observable with the empirical evidence of the fact that your watch tells you that 3 hours went by that you can't account for. I have those same things, and it's just fascinating to me to believe that people are experiencing these things, but the technology that's involved in that is got to be extraordinary if indeed that's what's going on.
Another time I was actually driving down a road in the mountains, and it was a very straight road, and nothing really unusual about the day. Otherwise, it was super sunny. The tree line, the sun was on the other side of the trees. So the tree line was jagged, but it made a real nice clear, it split the road about 2/3. So like third of the shadow of this tree line was on the right hand third of the road, but it made this really nice jagged, well-defined shadow on this powdery gray road, gravel road. So there was a definite shadow line. I was watching the shadow line and the sun would come through and hit the car once in a while. And I'm just driving along and I see this line jerk like about 8 feet from my right side to the left. It just went right across to the other side of the road and stopped,
Oh, wow.
So that's
exactly what we're talking about. The fact that the seamlessness that we've experienced in the past, in that case, the seamlessness was off a little bit because you noticed it.
And I never felt anything. I mean, in the past I had felt numb and this odd feeling where I was just suddenly a little bit out of it and just very numb. But this was nothing. I just saw this shadow move. Yeah. It didn't move at all. It was at one point A and then it was in point B at that same second. It just shot across the road and what is that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have any answers. I've told people that, well, what do you think happened? Well, I really don't know, but obviously, everything's fine. The earth is fine. Everything's fine. But there's a differentiation between the physical and, I don't know what. I couldn't even explain it. It's just amazing to see. Never forget that.
Well, this group that I have founded and direct, the UFO I-Team, we have highly placed and educated hypnotic therapists that literally will bring people back to those times in regressions. And it's amazing some of the stuff that comes out of those sessions that, by the way, end up kind of percolating or have percolated already sometimes in their life in dreams and those kinds of things. Did you ever have any follow-up dreams that had to relate to those kinds of events, do you think?
Experiences, not dreams. There was some experiences that I question and still do whether they were dreams or real experiences, but in my mind, it was all real experiences and not dreams. So, there are things that have happened that were so unusual. I thought that they could only be dreams, but that's not a unusual way to feel. I know lots of people who've mentioned that, and they feel the same exact way. It's just odd. It's not part of our normal everyday life and culture and how we react with nature, but obviously it's a normal thing and it's a part of nature. It just doesn't happen as much, or maybe we don't know that it happens that much.
Yeah. One good example is, our physical senses are relatively restricted. I mean, let's face it, we as human beings can only see a very limited amount of the light spectrum, right? We can't see in infrared. We can't see anything beyond whatever we can see as far as the colors that we perceive. That's just one sense that is restricted that we know of. So obviously our sixth sense and those kinds of things are probably restricted as well in what we can, take in. And believe it or not, what our brain will allow us to understand. Because I think our right brain, left brain thing is kind of like warring at each other up there in our heads, where they try to interpret all of these things and make it, understandable to us. And if it doesn't fit into our normal paradigm that we're used to, it's very easy to dismiss.
And I think, no matter what we do, any sense that our body has, whether it be hearing or smelling or tasting, it all relates. It's we're basing everything we do every day on something else. It's not that we have this wide open vision where we can take in something new and perceive it and figure that out. It's so much is based on what we've known, what we've learned, what we've experienced before. And I think that's one of the things that trips us up when we find that extremely unusual circumstance. It ends up being something so profound that we spend too much time overthinking it, and perhaps if we were able to do that or experience those unusual things over and over again, it wouldn't be so unusual and just be part of our life, just like combing hair, eating dinner or something like that. We're creatures of habit, and we interact with our environment because of what we know.
Well, I think you're exactly right, Cameron. I'll tell you why. I think we are now seeing this, the quickening, like we're calling it, of the red pilling of the public for the new things that are coming along that we are now going to have to deal with as far as consciousness expansion and all that stuff. Of course, ever since the New York Times article in 2017 confirming the existence of UFOs, the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, saying that there is a major program still ongoing at that point to study them. But just even last year, with all the revelations that they were talking about, and it hit big. For instance, the Admiral Wilson smoking gun UFO memo of the century, like Richard Dolan calls it, was released last year, where J2, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, second in command and in charge of all the intelligence divisions of the military, Admiral Thomas Ray Wilson, was interviewed by, supposedly, Dr. Eric Davis, and he talked about the Roswell, New Mexico crash happening. That dead bodies and alive bodies were recovered during that 1947 event. That the fact that the military is doing reverse engineering of these, alien technologies, and they have a craft that can travel interstellar at this point through our atmosphere, underwater, and through dimensions. That's just one smoking gun memo that happened last year. And I'll tell you what, Cameron, if you would like, I have some late breaking news regarding the Admiral Wilson smoking gun memo that happened just last Saturday that I would like. I was kind of saving this to bring it out on your show if you would like to hear.
I want to hear it. Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
We're going to break it here and a little bit further than what I heard about just the other day. But, for the entire, I'll start from the beginning real quickly, but on January 2nd of 2019, last year, my client, Grant Cameron, gives me a text, actually, very cryptic text. He says, Michael, I'm about ready to drop a major UFO bomb of information, and I need to run it by you as the paranormal lawyer, which that's what he calls me. So anyway, I'm waiting to hear from him. I finally get a hold of the guy, and he says that he got a hold of this 15-page memo, single space, by the way, that names programs, unacknowledged special access programs, people that are still alive, and Admiral Wilson, who was the subject of the memo, being interviewed about all of these things that, of course, we all have, thought about and basically said that they probably exist, but we've never had actual confirmation of this from that high level of a source, from the J2 Joint Chiefs of Staff, second in command. So after that, it actually broke in June 27th on Twitter. That was the first time the thing was actually made public, and then Grant and I could actually talk about it because we were vetting this document for 6 months, trying to figure out if it was real or not. Richard Dolan gets a hold of it and does his due diligence, and he confirms from his opinion that this thing is genuine, and that the things that are being talked about in this memo are earth-shattering, to say the least. But since then, nothing's been said. We have not had anybody involved in that memo. Russell Targ, Dr. Eric Davis, Commander Willard Miller, Thomas Wilson, the Admiral. We've had no one come out and deny or confirm that this memo existed or that the material in this memo was true or correct until Saturday, Cameron. Oh my! What happened was last Saturday, that would have been February 8th, 2020, at about 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Russell Targ, Dr. Russell Targ, appeared at a conference and spoke about, and the subject matter of his talk was the Department of Defense UFO unidentified aerial phenomena project. It was called the DOD's Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Project, and it was then subtitled the forward story, or the backstory and the forward story. So here's an opportunity now for a gentleman who is involved in this memo and mentioned in the memo because he was a member of the NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Science Organization, with Robert Bigelow, with Eric Davis, the scientist, and all these other people. Edgar Mitchell, by the way, was involved in that organization as well. And by the way, this memo, the paperwork from this memo came from Dr. Edgar Mitchell's estate papers when he passed away. That's how the thing finally got leaked out. But we hadn't heard anybody confirming or denying anything from the memo. Matter of fact, some people, including Dr. Targ, has actually said that in the past, even talking about it or trying to deny it or anything, making a statement about it would only serve to breach a security oath that many of them have taken. So he wasn't going to go there and say anything. But what happened was, at the conference, there was a question and answer session at the very end. And the public was there and could ask Dr. Targ questions. And some person, a young guy, comes up and had the chutzpah to ask Dr. Targ about the smoking gun Admiral Wilson memo. He mentioned that Richard Dolan has termed this as the smoking gun UFO memo of the century, and he wanted to know if Dr. Targ had any comment. Normally at this point, no one said a word, except Dr. Targ said on Saturday, you're not going to believe this, that memo involves an ongoing program.
Wow.
And then he says, for that reason, I am not going to comment. But here's the deal. By saying what he did before he said he's not going to comment, he actually said that memo involves an ongoing program. That was the very first comment we've ever had about the truth or veracity of this 15-page memo. Now, it even goes further than that, because then a friend of mine from MUFON by the name of Tom Whitmore actually sent me an actual link to be able to go to listen to the entire presentation that Dr. Targ did. The answer that was posted on YouTube or on Facebook of Dr. Targ's cryptic answer ends up being a little bit longer than that. So what he in reality said, not only does he say that this is an ongoing program and I can't comment about it, he prefaces it by saying, he kind of like restates the question to the audience. He says that has to do with the Admiral Wilson memo. He said, which my assistant, my colleague, Dr. Eric Davis, interviewed Admiral Wilson about. And then he says that involves an ongoing program. I can't comment. But do you hear what I just said?
Yeah.
He confirmed that Eric Davis, Dr. Eric Davis, a very highly sophisticated, behind-the-scenes government scientist, he confirmed that Eric Davis actually interviewed the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Second in Command, Admiral Thomas Ray Wilson. Therefore, basically saying, yeah, this memo is true, or not necessarily true. This memo is in reality something that happened. That's the first time we've ever gotten any confirmation that this memo might be a true and correct version of what they say it is.
So we have a lot of people out there who are really tight-lipped about things of a very sensitive nature, but then we have those who are the antithesis of that, who can't stop talking about experiences and government programs and things that they were involved in. What's your opinion of those?
Yeah,
of those two different kinds of people. It's really intriguing because, of course, I love hearing the stories, but then there's people out there who aren't going to tell you, and what's happening there? Why is there such a disparity in information gathering and giving?
Well, back in the 70s, Grant Cameron, the famous UFO researcher, and uncovered a memo from Canada, by the way, that basically stated in this memo, it was a leaked memo, that the United States is telling the Canadian authorities that the UFO subject is the most highly classified subject in the United States. It's even higher classified than the atomic bomb program. So if you can imagine something so amazingly kept close to the vest as UFOs, life on other planets, potentially aliens visiting our planet, there has got to be a major agenda out there to do many things: muddy the water, as well as promote people who are maybe even controlled opposition, so we can control the scenario that's happening to the public. And at the same time, there is probably some kind of an agenda, I believe, to swiftly red pill the public for what's really going on. I think that they realize that whatever is going to happen soon will maybe get out of their control, and they're going to have to kind of make sure the public can handle this kind of thing. So we've got people out there saying all sorts of strange things, and they're all over the board. Aliens are good, aliens are bad. You know, we got to protect ourselves with our Space Force nowadays. We've got to spend a lot more money, you know, through Congress to prepare us for this kind of event. So it takes a very discerning approach to this subject to stay on top of it and not be misled down a strange rabbit hole that's not going to take you anywhere.
Guys like Dr. Russell Targ's he's been involved in so many different facets of paranormal, you know, remote viewing and you name it. Is where does that come from? Is this something that he's pursued on his own, or is this something that he was asked to assist in and became part of just another government program?
Yeah. Well, Russell Targ, Kit Green, Eric Davis, all these people have literally been around for decades. They started in the old days in the 70s with the aviary group, you know, where the code names for many of them were bird names, so people could talk with one another over telephones and emails without, figuring out who they were talking about. Right. And then, of course, came along the BAS, Bigelow Aerospace, and a lot of those guys went into that organization, and then NIDS, and now To the Stars Academy. They're all involved together, kind of hopscotched along in these decades in these things, so they know in the background what's really going on. And they are, I believe, part of the process of being brought into a small circle of folks that have high clearances, and they can't spill the beans. But I'll tell you what, I'm feeling a little bit of a crack happening in the disinformation, basically truth embargo out there. For some reason, they are now saying things about these subjects at high levels. And even if you even look at the military now, they're coming out with gun camera footage of super amazing objects that don't seem to be man-made or made on the planet, as well as they're having to revise their guidelines so their military personnel can now openly report UFOs. So I think there's an amazing thing that's about to happen. If indeed 2019 was quite an amazing year as far as trickle disclosure goes, 2020 could be just phenomenal.
What do you think about Bob Bigelow? Where does he fit in? I mean, it seems that there's a lot of will of personal gain there, and that certainly he wants his piece of the pie. But beyond that, what's your opinion on Bob Bigelow, and is he part of the research that goes all the way into the military? Yeah.
Well, Robert Bigelow, the hotel magnate in Las Vegas, let's put it that way, he's a billionaire.
Right.
There's
more than one Bigelow.
Well, yeah, but he seems to be the one that's interested in the UFOs. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. And his interest goes way back. Matter of fact, he has some experiences himself. I believe his son as well. There's a tragic story there, I believe, as well. So he's always been motivated, but I think everyone will remember when Robert Bigelow appeared on 60 Minutes a few years back and was interviewed about this whole idea of his interest in UFOs and aliens. And he stated unequivocally during that interview that he knows that aliens exist and that they are visiting our planet. That's how serious this guy is. Somebody that's of his status with the military, with the worldwide community, can actually come out and say that his experience is that he knows that aliens exist and they are visiting the planet. Tells you a lot about this guy and his motivation to work with the military and the space programs. He probably knows a lot more than he's even willing to say.
Well, and I do have this strong opinion that there are people out there who could possibly be involved with the military and private, in part with their private adventures, but they're able to act and speak with impunity, and they seem like they're Teflon. Nothing can touch them. So why is there that part of this UFO related community, and then there's the other part that's so secretive?
Well, I think what they have is a plan to kind of slowly but stutter step-wise get this truth out there. There are some people they've green-lighted, I think, to say what they want to say. Some people are being a little bit more conservative. Although here's an interesting development that happened just last summer that is just a startling fact to me. Dr. Michio Kaku, who everyone knows, you see him all over the mainstream media talking about space and quantum physics, and he's a theoretical physicist, of course, from New York University. He literally came out last summer and said himself that the evidence shows now, the preponderance of the evidence is that UFOs indeed exist, are extraterrestrial. They are not from our planet. And now he says that the tables have turned. It is now up to the military and the U.S. government to prove that they are not extraterrestrial. Now, if a guy like Michio Kaku can say that with impunity on the mainstream media, on Fox News, on all sorts of other outlets, in mainstream, publications, something is afoot. Something is about to happen. Otherwise, that would have not happened last summer.
What about the idea that we're actually seeing these things, and yes, they do exist, but they are us from the future?
Yeah, I've often loved to munch that over myself. I as an analytical lawyer, I got to keep all my options open, and I want to see whatever proof I can about that idea.
In theory, it works better for me, but then again, I mean, I'm on the fence.
Well, here's the
for the ride through anything. Go ahead.
Here's the theory that does not work for me.
Right. For
aliens being us in the future. If indeed they are us from the future, obviously we survived. At some time in the future, we did make it there. If they're coming back here, what would their purpose be? Their purpose really couldn't be, hey, wait a minute, you got to change what you're doing or else you're not going to survive, right? Because obviously it's a moot point. They did survive. They're coming back from the future. So that is a conundrum to me of why it would be potentially alien or our own selves from the future. Unless, by the way, this is interesting, Cameron, what if we find out that time is not linear? There are multiple time frames going on or timelines going on simultaneously, and things that do happen in the past potentially could affect the future. All sorts of things are there to be able to talk about and think about, and I haven't gotten an answer to that yet, but I sure am fascinated by the questions.
Well, and I think that even now we pursue the idea that it is possible to travel in time, whether it be limited or unlimited, who knows? But I think that since we're looking at that now, and we do have some theory and we do have some reason for pursuing that, it doesn't surprise me that for 30,000 or 100,000 years in the future that we're going to use that. and we're going to use it to whatever advantage we can, because certainly we are exploiting everything on this planet we possibly can to better ourselves. So why not the future and the ability to time travel?
I love the way you think. That's very analytical. And by the way, here's a real great concrete example of this. We've all experienced, or at least heard about, people who experience missing time, potentially alien abductions. They're losing 3 hours like you did, during that one event that you had. I have even heard of people who claim to have been abducted by some force and brought back, believe it or not, before they were actually abducted. Have you ever heard of this, where someone says, all of a sudden, I'm sitting there watching television, and a second later, I'm watching the same show over again for about 5 minutes before I catch up to when I remembered the end of the show, watching the end of the show. And what supposedly happens is that these people are brought back after an alien abduction, potentially, and literally brought back a little before the time that they were actually taken aboard the craft. Now that points to the idea of time travel being able to happen.
I've thought a lot about that, and I'm sure that you can identify with this. You walk into a room, and I know everybody does this, and I'm not trying to over exaggerate this, but you walk into a room, why am I here? And I often have that feeling, I know people, they'll walk into a room, why did I walk in here? I totally forgot why I walked in here. But I always have that feeling that, didn't I just do this? And, which
deja vu
all the time. And, it's unbelievable. And it stops me in my tracks. And I think about it, and I think about it, and I think about it, and I feel it fading away. There's an idea there. There's a concept.
Yeah.
There's a memory there, and I feel it just get sucked away. And what is that?
Yeah.
It's amazing. But then, I also can say, and I'm a real advocate of how powerful the human is, because, we can do things, and we've been shortchanged for so long, and there's so many people that, humans couldn't possibly build that or do that. Well, we can, and we have, and the things that we are doing, have done, and we're going to do are amazing. And just look at the last 10 years, and we don't even pay attention to how much our lives have changed in 10 years, with technology. It's changed so much,
I mean, in 1903, we finally get off the planet in the Wright brothers airplane for a short period of time. And by 1969, we're in space.
Right.
Give me a break. That's amazing.
That's a glint. That's a glint in time. That's nothing. It's amazing.
That's nothing.
Yeah.
Like in a span of less than 70 years, all of a sudden, we have a major paradigm shift on the planet. I believe, Cameron, we are right in the midst of that right now. I think we are all really lucky to be alive right now. With all the amazing paradigm shifts that are happening all around us every day, we are going to be witnessing things that are going to be unspeakable in the next year or so, I think.
But then at the same time, we're so used to things changing now. I mean, we're just, we can bear, and I'm guilty of this, man. I can't watch a movie anymore, Michael. I mean, I got to go to YouTube and you have 2.5 minutes of my attention. If you don't get it, I'm going to go somewhere else. And that's sad to say. But that follows me around, but it's my desire for knowledge and as quick and as fast as you can get it to me. But it's, I've changed, so it doesn't even amaze me at all how much things have changed. What I'm really amazed at is that there's so many smart people out there with the ability to do some of the things that we're doing. I mean, where do these people come from? How does this even happen? But they have this incredible desire. They can't get enough of it. And just like there's something out there that you want to know about. And, it's one of those things that really makes us, that's why we're human. And our ability to change and adapt. And we don't have to, it's not survival of the fittest anymore. We just change our environment.
Yeah, we are getting more of a better picture, I think, of our environment and what it actually entails than just the three dimensions, that we're used to. And I'll tell you what, I think the newer generations that are coming onto the planet are total different human beings than what I'm a baby boomer. I was born in 1952, but I'll tell you what, I've raised 4 adult children now, and they are totally different. These young people out there are completely in touch with each other 24 hours a day.
Right.
They have they are. They could care less about getting their driver's license, right? Like we did.
That's crazy.
And literally they have a not even a world point of view. They have a universal or galactic point of view that they're being raised with almost naturally. Dr. Roger Lear, the famous podiatrist who did the alien implant removal, said all the studies that he has seen of the measurements of the newborns since the 1980s, he says, have just astronomically changed for the better as far as their abilities to lift their heads up earlier, walk faster, walk earlier, have cognitive skills much earlier, and more importantly. So I think that there's a major, potentially, hybrid program going on that we are just having to get used to.
How often do you see kids out there on bikes, like a group of 5 or 6? It's just, you don't see that very often. And it's funny because I have 3 kids and they're spread, from 13 to 22. And the 22-year-old could not wait to get his driver's license. And the 13-year-old, he kind of wonders why we even talk about it. And he can network in his bedroom, and kids are coming over less and less and less, and they have headphones and mics, and they're talking to each other, and it's just it's such a different world.
They're going to live in virtual realities.
Absolutely.
That they are going to interact with their friends, and they won't even see them for years.
Right.
It's going to be fascinating, and I don't know if it's going to be good or bad, but we have to recognize that things are changing quite swiftly in our own bailiwick back home. Even in Glasgow, Montana, it's happening.
They don't go outside in Glasgow, Montana because of the mosquitoes, but that's a whole different place. It's a great place. I should knock Glasgow. It's another. We have a lot of Montana towns, and they're spread all over the place. It's amazing. I'm 54 years old, and I bet you 6 months or 3 months doesn't go by where I haven't all of a sudden heard of a Montana town that I didn't even know existed. And it's a big place, but it's a great place. And it's changing too dramatically, and people are coming here. Well, you've seen the buildup like where you are. I mean, people here in Montana, back in the 80s and 90s, they really, they were going to go to college and they were going to move to Seattle, or Denver. And it's a great place to be, but it's becoming so metro now. It's amazing. So I don't know if I could do that. I have a hard time in traffic, Michael.
Oh, that is frustrating. Although nowadays traffic is becoming irrelevant as well with being able to work from home and make a living with not having to commute. So even that kind of stuff is changing as well. I don't know if it's going to get any better, but literally the capabilities are out there to have a different lifestyle than we're normally used to.
I was going to ask you, I was reading your bio, and did you originally intend on getting into broadcasting at Washington State? Is that is that how you started out?
No. I literally got a broadcast journalism degree from Washington State University, which is the Edward R. Murrow College of Communications, by the way. I mean, I don't know if anybody knows Edward R. Murrow nowadays in this generation, but he was the ultimate broadcast journalist, back during World War II. So I went to Washington State because I just, the UW was a little too close to home for me, being raised in Seattle. So I wanted to get out of Dodge for a while, when I was young. Pullman was just beautiful in the middle of literally nowhere, almost like Montana. In the wheat fields of eastern Washington, there's this beautiful university. And I was just having a blast doing a little bit of everything out there, running for student office, and living in a fraternity and being the microphone man at the football games, at WSU, traveling with the football team, in the rally squad. But at one point they said, you know what, you're going to have to pick a major. And political science.
They spoil the fun, don't they?
I know. They're saying, what do you mean? You got to graduate with something. Yeah. And the only thing that I knew I was at least good at was, speaking a little bit. Maybe I could, pigeonhole myself into a broadcast journalism degree, which I finally did. But then the thing was, back in the 70s, when I graduated, there was a real lull in hiring back then. It was kind of a strange time. So my only job offer out of WSU was a small little one-lung radio and television station in Twin Falls, Idaho.
Nice.
Now, consequently, my brother had graduated from WSU with a fashion design degree, believe it or not. We were both jocks and wrestlers, and he got a fashion design degree because he wanted to move to Hollywood and become a Hollywood costume designer, right? So he's going to move to LA, and I get the option now to either go to Los Angeles with my brother or Twin Falls, Idaho. So I went to LA and did all of that stuff for over a decade in Los Angeles, doing some amazing stuff and really enjoying it. Finally going to law school in California before I came home.
So when you hear Edward R. Murrow College of Communication and a degree in broadcasting, did that Edward R. Murrow College degree differ from other liberal arts colleges where you could get a degree in broadcasting?
Oh, I tell you what, the Washington State University Communications program is bar none one of the tops in the entire country, even over the University of Washington programs. Matter of fact, all of the local commentators out here in the Seattle area, many of them are graduates from Pullman. It is really a hands-on program where literally young people, they have 3 radio stations and 2 television stations on campus that the students run.
Wow.
By the time they're out of there, they are ready to step right into a major market and produce for them. Yeah.
So what made you decide to be a lawyer?
I had banged around show business for well over a decade, starting out as Shaker, the country bear at Disneyland, went on to be a tour guide at Universal Studios, then finally ended up being the best job I ever had was being the host in the green room backstage at Universal Studios Amphitheater in the vortex of music heaven in Los Angeles and Hollywood for many years, opening the seasons and being the gopher guy for Frank Sinatra and all the rock groups, Willie Nelson and all the comedians, George Carlin, everybody came through the amphitheater, and I was their gopher guy basically. But I tell you what, at one point I said to myself, you know what, I could be doing this for another 20 years because I did see people, looked around, I saw people there still slugging it out all those years, not quite making it, almost making it, and the carrot was right in front of their face, but they couldn't quite get there. I decided, you know what, I'm tired of working for somebody else. I want to take a little bit more control of my destiny, and I decided I'm going to go be a lawyer, and I'm going to work for myself. I went to law school when I was 32 years old, and I had a family, a young 2-year-old daughter, and started from scratch.
So back then, when you first started college and later on through law school, were you studying ufologist then?
You know what? I had always been interested in the paranormal well before I even, went into the law, which is kind of weird. People always ask you, did you become interested because you had a major sighting or something when you were a child, or do you remember something strange? Not really. I didn't have that aha moment. I was just always one of those people that were into the idea of the esoteric, the Fortean, the paranormal. And then after I became a lawyer, I still did those kinds of things. I was an APRO field investigator for the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization back in the 70s. I worked and helped Peter Davenport since 1995, do his legal things that he needed to do for the National UFO Reporting Center. To tell you the truth, my local bar association here in the state of Washington recently did a featured article in their bar news about me, and they monikered me as the paranormal lawyer to all the other law professionals in the state. So I said, oh my
Nice.
God, I've made it, I guess. I can actually talk about this amongst my peers. And I'll tell you what, I've never had any blowback or negative feedback about my experience or interest in the paranormal.
So where did you get your information back then? I mean, where was your go-to source, and how would you get that? And it's so different now.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Back in those days, you could sign up for like the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization monthly newsletter, right?
Right.
There were the Saucer Watch newsletters. There were the books by George Adamski. Remember those old dusty paperbacks that we would find at garage sales, for a quarter, about contactees, George Van Tassel, all these people that are actually talking about speaking to aliens in the desert, that they met in, saucers that landed out in the middle of nowhere. And then, of course, all those things were things that you would, accumulate over the years. Eric von Donigan's books, were very popular, that kind of thing.
Chariots of the Gods hit me when I was a kid. Growing up and going to this little school and have this little tiny library, which was realistically, it seemed huge back then, but it was probably a 20-foot wall, 8 foot high, and that's it. But it had Chariots of the God.
Can you imagine the reach of that book if indeed your small Montana community had a copy of Chariots of God?
Yeah,
that shows you how much impact that book had on the world, literally.
And, there was other serials that back in the day, and there was, I even have, I was going to post a couple of these later on in the week, but I was digging through some stuff, and they weren't comic books. I mean, the front looked like a comic book, but basically it was like a 1/4 inch thick, and it was just all text, and it was articles, and it could be anything from UFOs to grizzly bear attack or whatever. But there were so many of those that, from the mid 50s through the 70s. But a lot of those stories, and I'm looking back at some of these things that I don't even remember happening, but they made news, back then, were kind of like one-hit wonders. And there were some things that happened to some people that were pretty special. And they got written up, or maybe they were in a newspaper somewhere, but that was it, and it was done, and that those are things I really like to look at and read about, because they're real people.
In the old days before the internet, what you could do is you could actually sign up for a clipping service, a newspaper clipping service, that if you told them you're interested in horses, in baseball, whatever, they would literally send you clippings out of hard copy newspapers on the subjects that you're interested in. So many times people would sign up and get these newspaper clippings about UFOs all across the United States. And you're talking about the old Fate magazine. Remember that periodical that would come out? And they would have literally kind of semi-mainstream articles. Matter of fact, Kenneth Arnold from the Mount Rainier UFO sighting in the state of Washington in 1947 was charged by Fate magazine to go out and cover the Maury Island incident UFO incident here in the state of Washington as well.
Interesting.
And it's the weirdest thing to think that the Maury Island incident happened 3 weeks before Kenneth Arnold's sighting, and another week before the Roswell, New Mexico sighting. And literally no one really knew about the fact that there was a major wave going on of UFO reports even before Mount Rainier.
Well, and a lot of those things would pop up from time to time too in Popular Science, and Popular Science was a vastly different magazine back in the late 60s, and it was very colorful and hand done, and it wasn't there wasn't a photograph on the front. It was very colorful and different articles, and there was different portions. I remember as a kid thumbing through there, just looking for certain things. And I don't remember what the section of it was called, but it was always like 3 short blurbs about something that was just totally off the wall and amazing that I had never heard before. And that was one of the things that I really looked forward to back then.
And indeed Popular Mechanics as well. And the National Geographic.
Right.
Back in those days, those articles were groundbreaking. You wouldn't see so much potential agendas happening in those periodicals back then. So it was just the wild, wild west of the paranormal when you and I were growing up. I really enjoyed that.
And you used to, in National Geographic, I mean, the most impressive thing, there was different articles on different tribes of the Amazon and wherever. And the way they presented that then is much different now. But, because that was our first look. Back then, that was our first opportunity, and we had a chance to see people from the same planet that were so entirely different than us, and that was our only exposure because I grew up in an area that we had on a good day we had 2 TV channels,
and they were black and white, right?
and that was using a lot of foil. Around the cable and everywhere else, and trying to dial that in, and it changed every half hour. I mean, it was just different. You were fighting the TV all the time. And
isn't that fascinating? I just love trying to explain that to my kids. You actually had to get up off the couch, walk over to the TV and turn the channel if you wanted to watch something else.
Well, and the thing that was, I think, really amazing is the fact, and I just remembered this the other day because I was on Facebook Marketplace and somebody had a TV tube tester. And I remember this guy who was a neighbor, maybe 3 blocks down, like he would just show up. And I think one of my parents had called him and he would take the back of the TV off and he'd be pulling out tubes and sticking these tubes in this tester. And, I'd watch these tubes glow. I had no idea they were in the TV. And then he would replace a tube. And, for 3 months, our TV would be better, temporarily, and it probably cost, $6 for him to come over and do that. I'm 54. Things have changed, in 50 years, it's amazing. And can you imagine what 50 years would look like in the future right now? I mean, from now?
Oh, no, it's just going to be astonishing, and that's why, I think it's imperative that we rise to the occasion as far as this cosmic awareness that's happening around us, because we are going to get to a point where things are going to be happening so quickly that there's going to be some very disenfranchised groups and age groups and individuals out there that are really going to need some help. And I tell you what, I think the faith-based community is one of those communities that needs some help to get over this paradigm shifts that are going to happen. I used to be, for many years, the vice president of Puget Sound Christian College, as well as being a lawyer. I was their business manager. And literally, I'm a faith-based kind of guy, but I'll tell you what, we need to kind of get a lot of those folks up to speed on what's really going on out there so that we don't lose them. I tell you what, if we lose the fabric of our faith-based communities, our corner churches and synagogues, we're in big trouble.
I'd never heard of that one, but I think you have PLU out there, right? Is it Pacific
You got it.
Lutheran University?
Pacific Lutheran University, one of the best private colleges out here for sure.
Yeah, I'd looked into that, and they're great at recruiting. They love, I remember when I was in high school, I don't even remember how I even found out about them, but that was one of the colleges that I looked at, if I ever decided to leave Montana, which obviously I did not, but.
Yeah. Interesting. It's a small world. We all kind of seem to sometimes cross paths very quickly and maybe even stealthily in the night, and we don't even know about it until years later. That's fascinating.
Take just a minute, if you would, talk about the UFO I team and what that's about.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. We have a highly experienced and educated group of sophisticated paranormal researchers, field investigators who go out and literally we have skywatch safaris and expeditions, and we have gear like you won't believe, technical, scientific data gathering gear that we bring with us to our skywatches on a pretty regular basis during the good weather times during the spring and the summer and the fall, where we then record anomalous activity in the night sky, the daytime sky, UFOs, UAP, whatever you want to call them, sometimes up close and personal and sometimes not so, but very strikingly, like I'm talking 90-degree turns on dime with, video that we have. I'm talking tracks that literally of UFOs that will travel in a sine wave, which literally, like the Schumann resonance of our planet, matches to the actual resonance of our planet. That's how they're traveling. They look like maybe they're going in a straight line, but in reality, when you zoom in and put it on an oscilloscope, it's literally, they're almost like they're traveling in some kind of a frequency as well. So we have a Facebook page where we post all that stuff. Anybody can come and join and watch what we're doing. We typically even try to have live sky watches periodically on our Facebook page. And if anyone wants to join our weekly Zoom broadcast meetings on Monday nights, Pacific Standard Time at about 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., they can join us anywhere they are in the world by going to UFO I-Team on Facebook and clicking on the link to our meeting that week on a Monday, and join us, and you can tell us what you're doing out there wherever you are, and we can share the information that we come across.
Very good. And also let everybody know where they can find you online, and if they ever want to contact you. And I know you're on Facebook.
Yes, well, we're definitely on Facebook. You can go to UFO I-Team, and the I in I-Team is lowercase typically, although you'll find us either way, but it's UFO I-Team on Facebook or Michael W. Hall on Facebook. I've got a couple channels there. And also on YouTube as well. You can punch in both of those and get our videos and find us. We also have our old website is ufoiteam.com. So thanks for letting us put that info out.
Awesome. And such a pleasure to be able to talk to Michael Hall tonight. And Michael W. Hall, thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Cameron.
My Alien Life Podcast.
You can find my website at www.myalienlifepodcast.com, and please subscribe to my latest downloads at iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and at podbean.com. And please follow me and like me on Facebook and Twitter. My Alien Life is written and produced for broadcast at Studio 254 in the Northern Rocky Mountains. The music you are hearing is produced and created by Elion. You can find all Elion's work online at Heart Dance Records.